So I
Okay.
just wanted so I just wanted to welcome everybody to this morning's ASCILITE live webinar. I'm David Porter, the facilitator for the session, and currently serving as part of the ASCILITE executive and the organizer for this webinar series. So for this morning, sorry, I forgot what time of day it is. This morning's webinar, I would like to introduce Kwong Nui Sim from Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand, Dr. Mike Rose from the University of Surrey in New Zealand, and Dr. Kim Brown and Sarah Stein from the University of Otago, New Zealand. And they are going to share with us about their 23 Things for Research, which is an international collaboration. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the team, and you can get us started.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. As David says, we have 4 presenters, but unfortunately, Kim from Otago cannot join us this afternoon. It's 1 o'clock in New Zealand in the afternoon, and it's 10 or 11 o'clock at night for Mike in the UK.
It's actually midnight. It's nice. So it's early in the morning too now.
Yeah. So yes, Kim has a teaching commitment, and that's why she's not here today. So when I was asked to possibly do a webinar, I thought I would like to share this newly emerged idea between 3 institutions, both in UK and in New Zealand. And the name of the thing is called, or the project is called 23 Things for Research. And it's an international collaboration platform that we are piloting. And Mike would tell you more about this program because it started in Surrey later. So yes, next one. So the context is these 23 things for research. The overview of the goal or the aim of this project or the program is to enhance researchers' awareness as well as their mastery of ICT tools, which means digital technology tool or information and communication technologies for doctoral research as well as for supervisory roles. So how doctoral researchers as well as doctoral supervisors use technologies in the research process. And at the same time, we hope that these 23 things for research can build international and interdisciplinary links, especially in this context. As you can see, we are from different countries as well as different institutions for researchers as well as for the partner institutions. So last year, no, actually, well, it was 2018. Sarah and I, so both of us are in New Zealand. So Sarah is in another university called University of Otago, and we both of us did a project, and we were quite fortunate to get a local national grant. And we concluded from that project. And Sarah is going to tell you more about our project in a minute. So the background of this 23 things for research is our study concluded that there is a need for several things. So as you can see on the slide, there are 5 things. First of all is to recast the relationship between how digital technologies are used and the relationship with research skills, not only for the doctoral researchers, but also for doctoral supervisors. Secondly, we conclude that there is a need to provide opportunities for doctoral supervisors and students or researchers to challenge their existing ICT use comfort zone. And that is highlighted in red because that emerged not only in this study, but also the pilot study before that. So how supervisors and students are actually in their comfort zone, and which is, I think, is quite natural that everyone has their own comfort zone. But in this sense, is how they use ICT in their comfort zone and how to break through that comfort zone is something that we think need to be challenged. And the third one is about reflecting on assumptions about doctoral research process to embed ICT use within it. This means there are existing literature saying that what are the benefits or what are the advantages of using ICT tools in different contexts. But specifically in doctoral research process, there might be limited literature on that, and how the ICT use can be used to enhance this doctoral research process is even more limited. And the fourth one is about reflecting the meaning of being efficient and effective, and what that means in terms of doctoral research. So how to use ICT tools efficiently and effectively. So a lot of the cases or the participants or the data that we collected in our study so far actually questioned how efficient and how effective doctoral supervisors as well as doctoral students use ICT. I mean, ICT is unavoidable. The use is unavoidable in the doctoral research process, but have we actually used it in a more efficient and effective manner? That is something that we are reflecting upon on. And lastly, to explore the effects and the possibilities of ICT use to support the research process within the doctoral research context. So what are the other possibilities outside the comfort zone to be more efficient, to be more effective, and how does that mean to change, maybe to change the nature or the process itself? I mean, the outcome, we all know that is the PhD thesis, and how about beyond that when they have done their PhD? So hopefully this will give you some background context that helps to emerge this collaboration. So I think with that, it will be Sarah's turn to tell you more about our findings. Sarah.
Yes. Now, out of our little study, Nuri and I developed this diagram. We've called it a theoretical model, because what we were doing is trying to describe the relationships we found between the people had between them and ICTs, and we explored lots of things, looked at diagrams and models that other people had used for a number of different purposes, for professional development, for just conceptualizing practices, all sorts of things, and bundled a number of them together to come up with this. So it's really in its infancy, but we figure we'll have a go at and see if we can polish this a little bit and work with it. So it's in that kind of form. And basically it's referring to the fact that for an individual, and in this case, say the doctoral student or the doctoral supervisor or advisor or however you would like to label those people, they're dealing with external factors and internal factors. And it's a combination of external, as in the environment around them, the materials, the resources, the literature, the ideas that are around and they're encountering all the time. The internal factors are more about the person's views, beliefs, well-learned practices, prior knowledge and experience, their experiences of their immediate world in their context, their discipline context, their institutional context, their professional context, etc., etc. And in amongst that is also the more specific context of the doctoral degree program, the discipline they're working within, and indeed even the subject within that discipline that they're working in, and all the norms and practices and techniques and all that goes along with that as well. And all of these things are having an influence on that individual's, as you can see right in the center of that diagram, decisions and judgments that they're making concerning how they go about undertaking their research, and as part of that, making use of information and communication technologies to aid and facilitate that process. So it's all about that interaction and that flow, sometimes a tension between the internal and the external. And of course, the personal is very important, and how all that is translated through the head, through the practice, to come up with the action. So that's essentially our little model. Anyway, that's sort of background stuff. Do I have control of the slide? Oh, I do. Oh, and this slide is just an example of a little bit of the data we collected during our project that we finished. Actually, it's got Simonstein 2019 because we finished the report last year. But as Nuri said, it happened the year before that, and probably the year before, yeah, across 2018. We collected data which was a series of interviews or discussions with participants, and we also got the participants to draw pictures. Diagrams of how they conceptualized, or how they conceptualized the doctoral research process, and then within that how they conceptualized where ICTs fitted. And this is just an example of one of those diagrams. We had some quite ornate ones, and this is quite a simple one, but for this one part of our analysis, I mean, it says lots of things when we were looking at it, but this just is one illustration of what we are concluding might be a limited use of ICT, the relationship between ICT and this action of undertaking this research. And it tends to be very, and through the words that the person spoke about, it was repeating practices already learned over many years, and there was very little sense in the way the person talked about their views of going beyond that. And I'm not quite sure about this individual, but this kind of theme came through in a few of our participants, who also expressed the less than enthusiastic desire to try anything new. And in fact, if they did venture into that realm of something new, a new digital tool or whatever, it became a challenge. It was an instant, almost a negative thing. Oh, too much effort. I've got more to do than spend wasted time exploring that. My focus is on getting this thesis done. So it's these kinds of things. And this is just one example, one illustration of some of the data that we gathered, and also some of the assertions, I guess, we were making about the views expressed by the participants. Can you move on, please? Thank you. And here's just a quote. Unfortunately, in our little study, because it was it was really hard, surprise, surprise, to attract supervisors to be actually involved in this study. We only ended up getting 2 from both our institutions. So most of our data comes from the student side of things, but that's fine. Just gives us plenty of potential to work with that. So for this one, the focus is, as it rightly should be, on getting that thesis done. And of course, that's the focus of attention, getting the project done. But it's all left to in terms of how to do it, other than knowing thoroughly the process that a research project is carried out, happens when one researches. There was very little exploration or expressed about how to go about that research process in any other ways than the usual sort of research activities that a researcher engages in. Very little, other than specific software of looking at project management tools, or a real good look at communication tools to work with each other, or to store data and analyze data. It was very much just the basics. Just the basics, we'll stick with it. And while there's positives in that too, but it was just that lack of propensity for, or that want to engage in anything beyond what we know. Maybe I'm framing that a little bit narrow, but there was a general tendency by a lot of the participants, not all, but a lot of them. Next one. Oh, yes. Okay, so there's just a statement saying that we started to conclude that, you know, we realized that so much of the focus of research students and research student study education is focused on the research process, which of course is very, very important and core. However, that's where it stopped. So even reflecting on our own institutions' professional development support for students and staff in the area of doctoral research, the focus was always on the research project and the process of research without going very much beyond that. It's just an interesting phenomenon. So we were just reflecting on that. We'll go on to the next one. So I'll just, before I hand over to Mike, I just want to say, you know, who said going to a conference, the only reason to go to a conference is go to a new and interesting city and have a good time for a few days, hopefully learn a few things and then go home. You also can meet up with interesting people. Look what happened. I was very jealous that Kwong Nui got to go to a conference on the other side of the world and I couldn't, but look what happened. Kwong Nui met up with Mike, and I'll hand it over to Mike because he's the one who introduced us to this wonderful idea of the 23 things.
Working? Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, 23 Things has emerged. It originally started at a museum in America, and then Oxford University picked it up as 23 Things for Research. And since then, several other universities have run a version of this themselves. And it's basically an online free form course that introduces participants to 23 different things that are useful for their research. Different universities have taken this in different directions. At Surrey, we've concentrated on using ICT that will be useful for your research, but also on building your professional profile. So we cover things like career planning, running a blog to build up your public profile a little bit. And we've run that for 3 years with decent recruitment, but relatively high attrition rates, as you usually find with online courses. So the idea that Kwong Nui and I cooked up, and then Sarah and Kim joined us, was that one way to get more people interested and to keep them going would be to introduce this international collaboration element that brings people from different institutions and different countries together. So it's a lot sexier, and we introduce this immediate mutual support system. So we want to, we can't do things in real depth, so what we tend to do is talk about one particular tool that does something very useful for a particular aspect of your research. So for example, reference management software, and then we'll provide enough material so that someone can get a general idea of the topic, but then with links to further information for them to pursue as they want. So it's quite sort of bite-sized. Some of these, as has been mentioned, do get overlooked by doctoral researchers because they're not immediately necessary for their research project. But especially in the UK, where there are very limited research jobs compared to the number of PhDs that have been taking on, we're increasingly having to push that researchers recognise the transferable skills that they can develop while doing their PhD. So they should look at some tools that might be beyond their immediate need. The way it works is basically that we publish blogs with this information in. For this year's version, we're doing 2 things per week. So it's a 12-week course with 2 break weeks in the middle. And the pod arrangement is that we've grouped all the participants into groups of 4. we thought this was quite a nice size so that they can talk to each other and get to know each other. And if one or two people drop out, it'll keep going, but it's not such a big group that someone's voice gets lost. And one of the things that keeps people going, and especially with things like blogging, is if they're getting feedback. So if we've put them into a pod and said, you guys have to talk to each other, they're more likely to help each other keep going. Okay, so as far as I know, no one has run this as an international collaboration before, a 23 things thing, certainly not between the UK and New Zealand. We registered just under 250 people, which took us rather by surprise. When I've run it internally for just Surrey, we've had around 50 has been the normal number. So we were expecting 100, 120. We've grouped those into pods of mostly of 4, so 59 of those. We had face-to-face launch events for each of the centres, so Otago, Victoria University of Wellington, and the University of Surrey in the UK, for those people to meet each other in the flesh where possible, and also a Zoom version of the same, because I always feel like online learning does benefit from also having a face-to-face element where possible. So we're hoping that will also help build a research community in the centres as well as between them. It's running, we're now into the 3rd week, so things 5 and 6 were released on Monday, and we'll run through to thing 23 will be released end of May. So we shall see how many of them stick the course. As I said, it's somewhat experimental at this moment, but it's quite exciting. The fun bit was putting all the pods together and working out how I can get one person from every institution plus having some overlap in their research interests. We also opened it up to institutions in the UK that are associated with Surrey through the doctoral training programs who fund PhD programs. So there's about 10 or 12 UK universities represented by other people as well, which again enriches what we can show and what's the potential for participants to get out of it. It's a blog and task model, fairly low tech, to be honest. Unlike Kongnui and Sarah, I'm not a techie person. We have, it publishes a blog that discusses the particular topic of the week. So for example, this week we have had a discussion of why and how to run a blog for yourself was one of the things. At the end of each blog, there's usually a small task, and that'll either be to build something towards your website. The idea is that several of the tasks are about building a website, and by the end of the course, they'll have their own professional website that they can use for promoting themselves, for blogging, or sharing resources. Some of the tasks are discuss an element with your pod to help them build up those kind of collaborations, and some of the elements are a broader discussion, so we ask them to contribute to the comments on the blog. So we're pushing them really to think outside of their own institutions, which, especially for the doctoral students, is something they may not have done before. I should mention that although the majority of the participants are doctoral candidates, we did open it up also to staff, and had a surprisingly large number of staff have signed up who wanted to build collaborations outside of their own country and institution, but also supervisors who wanted some information about better supervision practices, how to share good ICT with their supervisees that perhaps they weren't strong on themselves. So when we are building the pods, we've tried to match up usually 2 research staff and 2 research students, and we thought that that would make a really interesting group for those people who can help each other out with both experience in the field and experience of using the IT. We debated which things we would do, and we've shuffled those around based on the expertise of each of the centres. So some of the material is based on the previous version of 23 Things that I've run. I developed with Sam Hopkins, also at Surrey, but about half of the material is contributed by experts at each of the different universities. Library staff with expertise in reference management software or using Office 365, wellbeing centre staff about online resources available to help you manage stress levels and planning your work and those kind of things. So one of the advantages of spreading out to 3 different institutions was that we could harness a lot more resources and expertise to bring all that together. And then the 4 of us who've been running the program have then added in links and information that are more local to each institution, so that participants can explore those further locally. Okay. We are trying to change people's behaviour. It's often very difficult, especially with academics, as I'm sure everyone will already know. So we're hoping that the mixture of peer pressure and role modelling that the pods create will push people to try something new in a slightly safer environment. Having run it before, as I've mentioned, the attrition rate can be quite high, probably only about 30% of enrolled people complete everything, and about 50% do the majority. But those who get to the end tend to have very greatly enhanced confidence in using ICT, even stuff that wasn't covered in the course. If they find it easier to experiment and try out new things. We have noticed in the past that some collaborations have emerged from doing the project. We've had people doing joint presentations at conferences because they wrote about similar things on a blog, and that got them together. And within institutions and between the institutions, we're hoping that this will be a positive benefit for culture as people see what the possibilities are, and then have greater contacts, build new networks, and those kind of things. And what we found is quite a lot of supervisors have encouraged their supervisees to take part, even if they're not taking part themselves, as a way to, especially if they're early on in their PhD, to broaden their view of what's possible and what's out there. So we're hoping that this also feeds into how supervisors view those kind of training and learning activities in ICT that are available to their supervisees that they might otherwise think are not directly related to the project. We have found that referencing software is now pretty much, certainly at Surrey, it's rare to find someone who doesn't use it. I try to identify early on in their PhD that they probably should be, but in previous years we have found a couple of participants for whom referencing software was new, so it was nice to be able to introduce them to that, but also the different options, because often they'll just pick up the first one that they're pointed to and it might not be the most suitable one. We have covered areas like data management, copyright and open access, which last year has led directly to the founding of the Surrey Reproducibility Society. It's part of a wider movement within the UK, I believe internationally, towards a more open approach to science and data. And that society now meets twice a week in our training room and discuss various aspects of good science, and they're incredibly active. And also many participants have continued to keep blogging. Some of them saw completing the course as a task to be achieved, and that was the end of it, but others have really flown, and I thought I'll just pop in the, how do I put something in the chat box? What's that? There, a link to, I should have figured that out before I started to do that. All right, if you Google, I love classical ukulele, one of our PhD students whose mission is to prove that you can play classical music perfectly well on a ukulele, has kept up their blog, and it's amazing, full of interesting videos of them playing Bach on a ukulele, which is even better than it sounds. Thank you, Tricia. So I suggest after this seminar you all go there and stick some of their videos on there. Fantastic. The website itself is, so will this link out? As I said, it's fairly basic. I wanted to build something that I was able to build because I am not a techie person, and WordPress is the site that we recommend they use, so we can easily provide them with information. So I thought it made most sense to have a website built with those same tools. It basically consists of a blog where each of the things is a separate blog post that they can explore. There's some information pages about who the contributors are, who's written the blogs for us, and where you can go for a few more resources. I'm in the process of building a discussion forum as well, because I'm not sure what these situations are in Australia and New Zealand, but in the UK, pretty much all the teaching has now switched over to virtual. I'm working from home, which is great. But we figured that this is very timely, that 23 Things could become a support mechanism for students in both countries who might now not be able to go onto campus, might have less access to their colleagues and supervisors. So we have a ready-made community of researchers that they can then hook into. So shortly we'll also have a discussion forum. And I think that's me now handing back over to Kwong.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mike. So for the audience, we would like to end this presentation before Q&A about the future orientation and possibilities. So one of it is looking at the pilot recruitment. At the moment, as Mike said, we have about 250 registrations, which is more than what we have expected. But we are thinking in the future, maybe expand the collaboration to additional partners in different regions, partly not only to see the use of technologies, but also the research culture, the research practice in terms of the behavior and the assumptions or perspectives about using technology. So there are some discussions going on with potential partner. At the moment, it's Ireland, Australia, and Singapore. And of course, we would like to continue addressing the barriers, looking at what our participants are doing on the 23 things in these 12 weeks. It's quite fascinating to see whether there are other barriers to effective and efficient ICT use, and how we define being effective and efficient as we aim to normalize the key tools for doctoral experience with increased updates from participants or stakeholders, like what we have just seen from the past years. Surrey has now had a proper or standardized the referencing system. So for example, Surrey is going ahead with all the researchers need to have a Google Scholar page, which I think could be a great idea. And the last two is about encouraging research collaboration. So hopefully not only is a learning curve or learning journey for doctoral participants, either supervisors or students in this context, but also can have other more tangible outcomes or benefits at the end of the program, such as research collaboration. So Mike has done an amazing job in putting people in pods that hopefully will spark some sort of collaboration, or even just to establish connections from now on for the pods. And so last but not least, contribute substantially to current relevant research areas. We are aiming for a few disseminations, and Mike has successfully got accepted into one of the presentations, if it is still going ahead, the conference in Manchester. And we are doing other work for the rest of the year. So yes, thank you everyone for listening, and I think we are bent on time for another 15 minutes for question and answer if there is any. Thank you.
I think we should also mention here that Kwong Nui was an ASCILITE Award winner this past at the end of 2019 for her research efforts. This project being one of the things that was included in the consideration for that award. So I think we should note that there, and kudos to her for that. So this is great. I want to open it up. Are there any questions from the folks online? Things you want to know about this?
Silent.
Let me know.
Thank
Well, I wanted to say I think it's great, and looking at the resource, I think there's lots of things here that you know, particularly could be useful for students, and we do find that there is a fair amount of, like you said, replication where we're reinventing the wheel all over the place. So having sort of an open access resource to share this kinds of information with doctoral students is fantastic. Or even early career researchers who maybe didn't get all of this. So I think this is great.
Yeah, and and one of the sort of, I don't know whether it would be possible. So we are thinking about maybe not limited to doctoral supervisors and researchers in the future. So maybe we can roll it out to distance learners, for example, or other cohorts at the universities. Those are all the thinking points at the moment. And sorry, Sarah, are you going to say something?
I was just going to say it's very hard sometimes to express the importance of something like this. If you're in the teaching and learning area, I'm sure you experience it all the time with many academics thinking, well, it's just teaching and learning. Everybody can do that stuff. We're interested in this. This is most important for our discipline and our teaching in our part of the university. And yet this stuff, it's kind of taken for granted, but actually it's really important. So it's really hard. So I think this makes real something that is often hidden and assumed. So it's great, and I'm really glad to be part of this project. Yeah.
I think having research staff treat as participants as well as the PhDs is quite a big part in breaking down some of those barriers of PGRs thinking that they ought to have the approval of their supervisor before doing anything, when actually supervisors might not know about some of the same stuff that is new to PhDs. And just from what Tricia said, yeah, the website is open to the public. So as soon as the blogs are published, anyone can read them. So do by all means disseminate, and feel free to nick the material. We just leave it up there, partly because it's an online course. So although we're launching things every week, people follow it at their own pace. So we have, from previous years, some people will not do the tasks, but they really enjoy having a blog a week to read, whereas others will do the tasks, but they'll do them 4 or 5 in a week, and then not do anything for a month, and then come back into it. So we leave things up there for the people to catch up with, which is sort of semi-structured.
Yeah.
Right. Any other question or feedback? And thanks to those who communicate on the chat room.
All right. Well, I think we'll just wrap it up then. We want to thank everybody for joining us for this ASCILITE Live webinar, and thank you to Kwong Nui, Mike, and sorry, I forgot your name. For
Sarah.
Sarah. Sorry about that. For presenting and sharing your ideas. We do want to give everyone a heads up that we do have another webinar, actually another couple of webinars that are special sessions coming up, of course linked to the COVID-19 phenomenon, shall we call it, crisis. So the first one are stories from the front lines, looking at folks who have actually been in these situations before, of course, and where we've had things like H1N1 and SARS, as well as some folks from New Zealand who were in this mode where they needed to move online in the wake of the Christchurch earthquake. So we'll be hearing from those folks and about the process and the lessons learned. And then following that, our TEL advisors will actually also be sharing about steps that we can take in this process, and how the different roles can actually play a role in helping institutions to be successful in transition online. So with that, I want to thank everyone for attending, and have a great day.
Thank you very much.